Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Dr. Graham Taylor. I'm joined today in our show by Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness and a pioneer in adaptive fitness programming for individuals on the autism spectrum. With over 2 decades of experience working with neurodiverse athletes, Eric developed the PAC Profile, a unique methodology that integrates physical, adaptive, and cognitive assessments to create meaningful fitness programs. His work bridges the gap between exercise science and behavioral strategies, equipping parents, educators, and professionals with the tools to help individuals with autism build strength, confidence, and independence. Through his training and certification programs, Eric has empowered hundreds of professionals worldwide to make fitness both accessible and effective for this population. Today, we'll explore how Eric developed Autism Fitness, his approach to bridging physical fitness with behavioral learning, and the broader impact of adaptive fitness in fostering independence and quality of life. Eric, it's so nice to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Graham. Appreciate being here.
It's great to have you. As we start out our show, Eric, if you would share a bit about yourself and your background and what led you to create Autism Fitness.
Yeah, I'll give the long, short version of it. So I grew up Long Island, New York, and I had the kind of childhood where my friends and I would run around the neighborhood, and we would literally go through broken chain link fences to play down in what we would refer to as the swamp, which was a literal swamp near the Long Island Railroad tracks. We would actually cross over the tracks sometimes. It is miraculous that none of us were electrocuted at any point. But just what I think is missing a lot now is kind of that free play, jungle gym playground,
Absolutely.
or running around experience that doesn't seem to happen a lot in suburban areas anymore. And then as far as sports, I would play a little bit of everything recreationally around the neighborhood. And baseball was my thing for a while until it wasn't in kind of middle school and into high school, where my skill and interest level wasn't really at the competitive level anymore. And we're not talking about a very high competitive level, but, realistically to compete at even the varsity level. And so I ended up becoming sedentary and, gaining a lot of weight and not being active. And around my junior year of high school, I just decided of my own accord that I had had enough and started, I'll put it in air quotes, but working out and, going to the school gym and then getting into martial arts. But I recognized that I wanted to take control of my own physical health and well-being, which led me down the pathway to weight training and into other martial arts, eventually Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and every conceivable type of lifting, from Olympic lifting to powerlifting to today more, hypertrophy and strength-based training to sustain my my Jiu-Jitsu practice. And I recognized that there was empowerment in fitness, not just physically, but psychologically, emotionally. And I went to undergrad for forensic psychology of all things. However, most of my undergrad work was in general psych. And I thought, you know what? I really want to combine some aspect of psychology and fitness. So I go to graduate school initially for behavioral science, and I get recruited for this program in New York City working with teenagers on the autism spectrum in a fitness capacity, because along the way I got my personal trainer certification. I'm working with general population. I have a classmate in one of my graduate behavioral science classes who said, hey, I work in this program with teenagers on the autism spectrum. We've never had a dedicated fitness program. And I know you're a personal trainer, you're in a behavior science graduate level program. Would you be interested in working with us? And that was the catalyst for everything that I did, because when I started working with them and undergoing really remarkable mentoring in the field of ABA, and bringing in some of the exercise science information and the training knowledge that I had, I realized that there was no blueprint for any of this. There was no best practices or integrating, resistance training based programming for the autism. And, the term wasn't there at the time, but the neurodivergent population.
Yes.
And it was because you didn't have an interdisciplinary model that existed
No.
then. So how can you have best practices when the practice doesn't exist?
I like that story. I want to hear a little bit about more of what some of the needs were in the absence of the best practices approach. You're working this from scratch, and you become the best practice creator with some ideas. Tell me something though. I'm always fascinated by this. When you were junior in high school, you had this moment of realization that I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
What was your it?
Oh, that's such a great question. I don't know that there was one particular moment. I was bullied enough that I got to the point where I didn't like this. I think that the overarching term that ran through my head at the time, it's easy to go back and kind of cherry pick things or think of what I thought at that time, but I just did not feel good, about myself. I'll tell you something. I've never said this on an interview before, but I used to, some of the other students would refer to me as sweatpants. Like that was my nickname, was because I always wore sweatpants because that was what was comfortable for me. And looking back now, I'm like, wow, that was so weird that I was confined to just that. So I think there were enough moments like that where it wasn't this one, thunderclap situation where I said, no, this is it. But it was a series of meaningful enough situations and thoughts where I had enough of them.
I appreciate that. Kind of this cumulative mass that builds over time, and we kind of hit this point, and that becomes our it uniquely for each one of us. As you got introduced, to your own fitness, it sounds like you've done a number of things and really taken it to some really high levels of experience and mastery. You get this introduction to the group that are dealing with autism, and this is on a spectrum, and we refer to it oftentimes as kind of the neurodivergent, experiences that they have. And what were you seeing being some of the unique needs for them in their level of physicality and in their health that was unique to this population? What'd you find?
Yeah. So the first thing that I found was not much. And then beyond that, where I was starting to look for, with respect to research and just equating some of the things that I was seeing with some of my early athletes with the literature, or, what is the operational definition of this? And a couple terms come to mind. So low tone, poor gait pattern, hypotonia, those type of things to describe general deficits in strength and motor capabilities. But most of these are coming out of physical therapy and occupational therapy literature. So they're typically working with younger children, typically 10 and under. And most of the individuals that I was working with were teenagers and then, into adults. So the youngest ages that I was working with early on were kind of 12 to 18 and then older, a lot of whom had aged out of physical therapy. So I'm seeing these deficits in motor patterning, the kind of things that you can see it, but you can't, and you can describe it, but you can't necessarily say, okay, this is what you're seeing, these general issues where the movement doesn't look completely, not necessarily normal, but efficient. And so then the question there is, well, what's going on, number one, and then what, to my earlier point, what do I look at? What is the blueprint for this? And my coming in from an exercise science background, but not necessarily a therapeutic background, I'm looking for this step-by-step guidance of, okay, what do we do about this?
Really?
And that was a that was a blank answer. Or what do we do about this? From my perspective, okay, we strengthen it. How do we strengthen it? Well, by taking what we know in exercise science on how to get anybody strong and implementing it that way. But to your question, it's not just about the physiological deficits, because those are the easiest ones to pick out.
That's right. Yeah.
It's also about the motivation and the focus and the neurological and the neuromuscular too, the cueing, the ability to follow direction or to motor imitate.
Yeah.
These are all essential components of understanding and then taking action on those as well. Because if you think about motivation from the perspective of the neurotypical population to exercise, there are three main categories of motivation. There's looking good or looking better. So kind of gaining muscle, losing fat, the quintessential, which is perfectly fine. There is no judgment on any of these. These are all great. There's sports performance.
Yeah.
So sports specific or activity specific, whether it's, competitive sport or non-competitive sport, you want to get stronger, more powerful, move better for your sport. And the third is life improvement. Kind of the cliche of, a grandmother wanting to be able to pick up their grandchild and not have lower back pain, someone who wants to ambulate better, get around, move better without pain. Those are kind of the three buckets of motivation. But for many of the individuals I've worked with on the autism spectrum, those three don't exist, right?
Correct.
For them, or in at least as much as we can observe or listen for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it may be the case, but I don't know that, and I don't have any really good evidence to support it. So how do we introduce secondary or tertiary motivation for an autism or neurodivergent athlete to participate meaningfully when their motivation isn't inherent or relatable to one of those three main areas?
Yeah, I really like that. You're talking about oftentimes our motivation is what leads us into something.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love here is that you're bridging a gap that, brings these two components together here in ways that there was no blueprint for. You are the blueprint, and you're the one like we said before, creating the best practices. But oftentimes we come into something because like what you said as a junior in high school, I'm kind of fed up, I'm tired of being tired. I don't want to do more of the same and experience what I'm experiencing. And that could be your motivation. What you're talking about maybe with this population is that, and I'm wondering, and help me here, is maybe the motivation comes after they're exposed to it and they get to experience it experientially and how that feels and what they're doing. And maybe over time that becomes their motivation, but it's post the actual doing of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great point. And ironically enough, sometimes you have the inverse. So you have the relief model, or looking at it from the technical perspective of, alleviating a negative stimuli. So I don't want to feel this way anymore. So I am going to engage in an alternative behavior, i.e., regular, well-designed fitness programming. For many, not most, but many of the individuals that I've worked with, exercise and vigorous physical activity is aversive in the beginning, especially when you're not tying it back to one of those three big motivators.
Exactly.
So
why am I even doing this?
Yeah, exactly. Ironically, and we as coaches, and this is what I train people to think of from the perspective of being a coach who is tied to empathy, like taking that empathetic model of coaching. You have to get a sense as best you can of what it's like for that athlete to be doing that squat or that overhead press or that heavy carry, because they may not like it, which is not an excuse to say, well, they don't like it, they don't have to do it. But to understand that the inherent motivators that we may take for granted for many of ourselves, because trainers or fitness professionals who work with the neurotypical population, all of them have that person who, complains their way through an entire workout. Fine, great, but they're doing it. They're still doing it. So fine. However, that underlying motivation is still there for that client or that athlete. In our case, that underlying motivation may not be there at all, and then we are responsible for building in the meaningful nature of exercise for that individual so that they don't feel forced or coerced into, you have to do this, because have to is the death knell of long-term development.
So there's this piece where you're teaching for sure, just, the techniques of lifting and exercise. And that's maybe what most coaches tend to do, but you're bringing in another really essential element. It's the emotional and the relational awareness.
Yeah.
And also understanding what the athlete is experiencing to really help navigate or kind of shepherd them through aspects of these lifts so they get to experience something positive. What an artful role it sounds like the coach really plays.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, because there's, there's science and art, there's art and science. And when I have to have a 45-minute conversation around the habits of my cat in order to sustain an athlete's attention while he's doing cable rows and overhead presses, fine. It's an egoless practice, or at least it needs to be, because the more I can develop trust and camaraderie with that athlete, the more space they are going to give me to coach and to program effectively.
What you're doing right here now, I think, is kind of shaping an understanding of these are the kinds of folks that make the best coaches. This is what a coaching requirement is. That kind of heart, that egoless piece, the altruistic piece. I'm here for you and to meet you wherever you're at and what you need. And I'm willing to be what you need me to be to get you to experience what I so hope you can experience and benefit from. Let's talk a little bit when you have an athlete come in, Eric. The autism is on a spectrum, as we know. Walk us through some methodology here. How do you go about maybe assessing where someone may be and kind of matching and structuring the programs to kind of their current experience on the spectrum?
Yeah. So I needed to develop a methodology, and I think I actually reversed engineered what I was already doing, because when I put it down on paper, literally actually, writing it down on a legal pad, I'm thinking, okay, how do I actually do what I do? Because there are extraordinary coaches and teachers. And then sometimes you ask someone, well, how do you do this? And you need that formula. So I developed something called the PAC Profile. It's PAC. So you have the physical, you have the adaptive, and you have the cognitive. The physical is the exercise itself. So if I'm taking a squat, how well can this athlete perform this particular exercise right now? What's their baseline?
Good.
Can they complete it at what we call standard? So like 3 sets of 10 repetitions independently. If they can't, how do we need to modify it? If they can, great. How do we progress it? The adaptive perspective is what we were talking about for the past 10 minutes or so, the motivation and focus, right? That is a world unto itself, but to distill it down, I'm asking, how motivated and engaged is this athlete right now with this particular exercise? Are they doing it? Are they not doing it? Regardless of, okay, if they're, if they're complaining or they're talking about something else, great, but are they doing the thing?
Gotcha.
And then the cognitive is the one that I think often needs the most explaining around it. So I break cognitive functioning into 2 components. We have the neurological, which is communication, both productive communication. How does this athlete convey needs, wants, thoughts, feelings? And then, of course, receptive capabilities. And as we know, often those 2 are not the same.
Yes.
And then the neuromuscular, which is essentially the kinesthetic awareness. How do they respond to prompts and cues? Can they motor imitate? If I demonstrate this exercise for them, how well can they replicate that? Okay. And then what do they need as far as support? So I take the PAC profile and I have an athlete come in, and sometimes my athletes need round-the-clock one-to-one support. I've had athletes who drive themselves to the gym to do a session with me also. So it varies quite widely. But the first thing that I always want to provide an athlete is choice. Do you want to try this first? Do you want to try that first? Here's a hurdle step. Here's an overhead band walk. Pick one. I don't care. Doesn't matter to me, and it's not going to make any physiological difference whatsoever. But I want to invite the athlete into the session, giving them some autonomy over what we're doing. And my favorite 3 words to use as a mantra is, let's try this.
Gotcha.
Right? So not you have to, or that, like, let's try this band row. Let's try this band pull down. And if it doesn't go, it doesn't go. We can always move on to something else. So we want to give ourselves and our athletes latitude to commit to something in the moment.
I really like that. Yeah, it sounds like you're also kind of assessing if it's, let's just kind of proverbially say it's leg day. Well, we could do stairs, or we could do box jumps, or we could do extensions or presses or squats. Or you sound like you're saying, well, let's find out what you enjoy. We're going to get our legs done anyway, but what do you enjoy? And trying to match it to kind of what they take on.
Yeah, the order of exercise until we're getting to a moderate level of capability is almost immaterial.
Yeah, exactly.
The most important thing I can do in that first session, look, we have about 15 different exercises that we use and that I want to try to assess during a session. But the most important thing is that the athlete feels comfortable and capable. I've had assessment sessions where we get 2 exercises done. I've had assessment sessions where we get 1 done. I've had assessment sessions where we're done with the assessment in 10 minutes. I'm like, all right, let me start programming for you because we're good.
Yeah, that's so good. What do you want for your athletes in going through your program? What do you really want them to experience most?
For me, it's 2 things. It's in the session and then outside the session. During the session, when I start seeing self-correction with an athlete. So I'll give a squat, for example. An athlete is setting up for a box squat, which we typically use because it's great for developing kinesthetic awareness on their squat depth.
Yeah.
And I see them fixing their foot position. I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. They know what it's supposed to feel like. Yeah. So they're like self-correcting. I had one athlete years ago who he would squat and he got so adept at it that if he went too fast, he would say out loud, too fast, start again.
Oh, is that right?
And
cool.
I'm like, oh, he's got it. Like he understands what he has literally the kinesthetic awareness to know, I went too fast on the eccentric. I need to slow it down. This is how it's done. So that as a technician, because my big thing, so from a motivating perspective as a coach, I like seeing really good form. That's what does it for me. I'm like, oh, they're dialed into this. They know to slow down, control it. So when I see that in session, external validity wise, when an athlete starts generalizing some of those skills to their activities of daily living, because that's the whole point, really. I mean,
absolutely.
I refer to them as life skill athletes. When I hear from a parent, oh, they never took out the garbage before, but they grabbed the bag, hauled it outside with one hand, and they're like, okay, this is exactly what we want. It's not just, exercise for the sake of exercise, but exercise for the sake of having a higher quality of life and more independence. So I think you have the internal and you have the external. During the session, when an athlete's got it, they're dialed in, I can back off and take a video or just coach from 2 feet away. And then externally, when these things are showing up in their real life, those are the situations where I am just reinforced as to how important this is.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Continuing education is both a requirement and a learning opportunity, but finding the right CE provider can be challenging. AATBS, a triad company, offers continuing education for psychologists, social workers, marriage and family therapists, counselors, and behavior analysts. CE courses are available both individually and as part of our new All Access Pass. All Access Pass provides a library of over 250 unique courses. That's more than 800 hours of CEs, with new courses being added every month. As a special offer, Behavioral Health Today listeners can save 15% on CE purchases. Visit us at aatbs.com/BHT and enter promo code BHT15 during checkout. That's aatbs.com/BHT. Check out our library and check off your CE requirements today.
Eric, do you guys have, or do you take, some metrics around their health in terms of some health measures, whether it's heart rate or obviously maybe some strength, because you're going to see that improve over time, but flexibility, some of the athletes maybe have something like a diabetes or blood sugars or things. Do you take
Yeah.
markers on those things to kind of watch the
Yeah,
improvement over time?
that's a great question. The nutrition side, albeit important, is a little beyond the scope of my own practice.
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
know the essentials, but it's a whole realm
Yeah.
unto itself. I am taking metrics on movement quality and sets and repetitions and weight, and also prompt levels as well. So am I physically guiding an athlete via their elbows with a graduated physical prompt to take them through a full healthy range of motion, or are they completely independent with this? Those are the things that within a session and over time I want to adjust the most, because those are going to be the markers of progress.
As the coach and trainer that you are, that you found unique ways to connect with and help this athlete try something new, or try something on, or maybe deal with
Yeah.
some frustration. Are you ever this is off the top of my head, but are you ever consulted about, hey, how can I get across to my son or my daughter in a way that could be
Yeah.
helpful? Or maybe how could his teacher, help him with maybe, hey, let's try this, even that phrase. You ever get
Yeah.
consulted that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like interacting with a lot. Sometimes my athletes have other therapists, they have speech therapists. I love working in, speech targets. Like, okay, let's get that, full 5-word sentence
Yeah.
here. Yeah, life stuff comes up. It's such a great position to be trusted, not just with an athlete's fitness, but with their life. Yeah, I had a parent
Yes.
last year who was asking me about, acne formulas for her son, because I'm involved in his life. And it's like,
wonderful.
hey, well, try a salicylic acid in a face wash, and you should be good. Otherwise, I've, the number for a good dermatologist. Those type of life things that come in, because when you are involved in somebody's fitness, it's really, it's about their bodies, it's about their mental health, it's about their well-being. So it opens up trust among, parents and other people who are in that individual's orbit. So yeah, I get some very interesting questions and some conversations that I never thought I'd be having.
That's so cool.
Sometimes about nutrition, sometimes about health, sometimes about, what do you think about this school? Have you heard anything about this program? What do you think? What do you think of this? And sometimes it's great, and sometimes, I'm doing the sucking in on your teeth thing where,
Pretty cool. You got a kind of a nice intimate role, like you said, that builds trust, and it takes trust to allow these athletes to experience the things they are with you. I know that you do some certification training as well. You've got over 600 professionals trained worldwide. Who are
Yeah.
some of the folks that are coming to get trained, and what are they doing once they're trained in their fields that apply the things you've taught them?
Yeah. So I launched the Autism Fitness certification in May of 2017, because I thought what the world needs is another fitness certification, and going at for those in the fitness world, that I think that'll be appreciated. And when I launched the program, and I launched it not so much, at least in my mindset, out of necessity, but out of demand, because I had people asking me, oh, is there some way that I could get trained, some way I could get certified? And do I want to launch a certification or a mentorship? So I came to the conclusion that the certification and doing it independently was the way to go, outside of some other organization. And I thought initially that it was going to be predominantly fitness trainers. And we have had some, but the majority of professionals who are taking the certification are BCBAs and RBGs and adapted PE professionals
Yeah.
and parents. Also,
Fantastic.
so it's predominantly people who are already working with and or caring for the population. And we do get some fitness trainers, but it's people who are already so familiar with this population
Yeah.
that they have, that moment or that series of moments where they're like, we need a fitness program.
That's awesome. What a great way to round out kind of the dimensionality of their involvement with the students, not just, managing the behavioral piece or the communication piece, but why not weave in all of that stuff that you're doing into the physical piece, which I think is wonderful. What are some of the, just out of curiosity too, what are some of the common mistakes with this population that, let's say, professionals or those working with them might make in terms of coaching?
Yeah. The two biggest ones are, number one, expectation management, which I think a lot of that comes back to the coaching ego. Like, oh, I want to get all this stuff done.
Right.
Guess what? You're not going to. And at least not right now. Not in the first session, not in the second session, maybe not in the 12th session. You have to go at the pace of that particular athlete. It doesn't mean that after some time of developing trust and building rapport that you can't push a little, and you figure out how you can push, and you figure out when you can challenge. But managing expectations for yourself as the coach, as the practitioner, parent expectations also. I'm fortunate that in the 20 plus years I've been doing this, the parents that I interact with are phenomenal. You have to reason that if they are looking for a fitness program, one-to-one for their son or their daughter, that, the filtration system is already pretty good. And that's a parent who's already deeply involved in the health and well-being of their child. So the expectations of, and sometimes I've had parents who, will turn to me and say, oh no, they can do this. It's okay. I'm like, it's fine. I don't care right now if they can do this or they can't do it. Baseline is baseline. I'm going to see, and I know it's going to change. So it's my expectation, not that it's zero, but I have no expectation. I'm like, all right, let me see so I know what to do from here. And then the other big mistake is overcoaching, is trying to shoehorn in teaching with language by saying, okay, yeah, you're going to do an overhead press. So first grab the sandbells and then, get a really good grip and then make sure your feet are on the floor and then shoulders together. And you're like, you would lose anybody.
Yes.
When you're doing that. So again, developed a protocol for this that we call label, demo, do, and cue. So any coach, and this is, I'd call a tattooable reference. Someone across there, I don't have it, but
you can replicate that pretty easily.
Label the exercise, demonstrate it for the athlete, have them do it so then that you can cue. As soon as they start doing it, then you can do your job.
Yeah.
But if you're standing there explaining it, you're going to lose them. You're going to lose anybody.
Yeah. What's the best measure in a moment? Whatever may be with an athlete, what's your measure in that moment?
Is what is the intended outcome happening right now in all three areas? Physically,
yes.
Are they doing the exercise to the best of their current ability?
Right.
Actively, are they motivated enough that if it's a set of 8 or 10 or 12, are they doing the full set? And are they remaining focused? Are they getting dysregulated? Are there any observable, discomforts, anything like that? Okay. And then cognitively, do they understand the expectation for performance right now?
Good.
Whatever it is. And that could be the exercise itself. It could be, asking to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. It
could be, I need to talk to you about this, whatever it is. So I'm constantly, I call it the gumball machine. I'm looking for, okay, what's coming out? Is it the blue gumball? Is it the yellow gumball? Like what is
exactly? That's what you're measuring
right now.
That's really good.
Yeah, it tells me where to turn my attention. If I see an athlete getting dysregulated, I may need to wait a few seconds for them to self-regulate and regain focus. And okay, now I can coach. So I'm looking for my opportunity to coach as best as I can, in the moment.
Eric, regarding your certification program, we've talked about the number of professionals you teach worldwide, over 600 plus. And I'd love our listeners to get just a kind of a summary of what they'd experience in that certification and what they might expect in being involved in it.
Yeah. So the certification has 3 different levels. We have our pro, we have our expert level, and then we have our master level. At master level, you can teach the pro certification also, which is pretty cool. So the pro certification entails over 15 hours of online coursework. So you get in-depth information about the PAC Profile methodology, how we assess physical, adaptive, and cognitive functioning, programming, how to assess exercise form, which exercises we want to use, how to set up a program based on the PAC Profile, and then coaching and cueing. So deep dives into athlete communication, what to do, some things to avoid. And then in addition to that self-paced coursework, then attendees come to the virtual or in-person practical. So that is a full day of hands-on training. You can do that with me or one of our master level pros. We do it numerous times a year in different time zones. So it's a full day, either meeting me, virtually from wherever you are, or coming in person, here with me in Charlotte, or one of our master pros. And I also do closed group trainings for schools and organizations as well. So all roads here begin with the pro level certification. And as soon as someone registers on the website, they can start their coursework too, which is pretty cool.
Very good. We're kind of winding down here just a little bit, but I'd love to do a couple more things. One is give us a success story, if you will, if we want to use that terminology, but a memorable story of someone you started working with and what you saw begin to occur in their lives, and maybe even some transformation. Share with us a story, would you?
I have a recent one, and it's recent, but it's become one of my instant classics. So I'm a 34-year-old gentleman who he comes into a session every time. He's always early, and he gets right to it and does everything. He has his choices, what exercise order, but he's made remarkable progress to the point where he's deadlifting with an open trap bar, pulling 90 pounds off the floor. And as engaged as he is and as motivated, he is also an individual who tends to be hyper rigid around his schedule and what is going on. So it's rare, if not a non-negotiable, that we're not going to switch days or times for his session, especially around holidays. So it was New Year's Eve day, and he had vocalized to me in 3 previous sessions, oh, it's going to be New Year's Eve, so I'm not going to be there on, I think it was Tuesday. I said, well, it's New Year's Eve day, so I'll be at the gym, but I understand, if you're not going to be there, I get it. So this to me was, I'm not going to move the boulder today. Monday, I get a text from him. Hey, can I come to gym class today? Like, dude, I'd love to have you today. I'm really glad. The only thing is, you said you weren't coming, so I have another athlete who's training in your spot. Would you come in earlier at noon? And he said, yeah, that'll be fine. Oh, that just happened.
Yes, I just had
So
this
not
flexibility
only,
there.
not only did he overcome that rigidity, not in his entire life, but in this one big thing, but he also was willing to change the time to an hour earlier.
Eric, it's interesting. Of all the things you could have answered that question with, you could have said, well, he reached a level of fitness and more mobile in his life. What you talked about is that there was something in his autistic experience that began to be a little bit more elastic in a way that's more adaptable for him, less rigidity, relationally based, conversationally based. What a cool transition that is. And what a wonderful thing to share that takes place within this Autism Fitness program that you're doing, and watching these things emerge.
Yeah. Especially because, again, 2 decades plus in, I wasn't expecting that from him. I know this guy really well. I'm thrilled to be surprised.
That's a nice mile marker, of his growth too. That's wonderful. Where do you see Autism Fitness going in the future? What's your future goals and visions?
So from the big picture, as far as just positioning, The mission is to have fitness considered as an essential and not just an add-on. That fitness is as important as any other area of functioning and capability. So it's given not only priority, but understanding best practices in fitness as well. And with that as a a guiding practice, or I guess a guiding milestone of success, to get the programming into as many schools and residential facilities and
Good.
homes as possible. The only reason I don't mention gyms is because I'm also the program director for a remarkable facility right now in the Boston area called Inclusive Fitness.
Mm,
And we just celebrated 5 years. We have over 150 autistic and neurodivergent
fantastic.
athletes in our facility doing training based on a lot of the curriculum that I've developed and some things
Nice
that we've
job, man.
enhanced for the center. So continuing to grow and build out inclusive fitness and change, I don't know if it's the mindset, but change the way that exercise is considered. Not this would be nice, but going from nice to necessary.
Yeah, that's really good. That's a great takeaway message as well. Well, Eric, I would love to have folks follow up with you and Autism Fitness regarding your certifications, kind of some future visions you have. How can folks follow up after our show today?
Easy enough. On Instagram at the Autism Fitness, I post a lot of content featuring me, my athletes, some of the concepts and practices. Same handle on YouTube at the Autism Fitness, and then autismfitness.com for everything certification related, consulting related, and anybody currently in the Boston area, and then future expansion, who wants to go to the most outstanding facility on the planet. You can go to inclusivefitness.com.
Very good. Very good. Well, Eric, congratulations on your program. You got a good heart, man. You got a great focus, and what a life well spent, and some nice things being experienced. We so appreciate you being with us on the show today. Thanks so much.
I appreciate you. Thank you, Graham.
Also want to thank you, our listeners, for dropping by and joining me and Eric today. It's always great to have you with us. And by the way, we'd love to have your help. Would you consider leaving us a review and sharing the podcast with a friend? By spreading the word, you help us grow and reach more people, allowing others to develop the valuable insights that we all get to share with each episode. Regarding our episode today, I want to remind you that it and its resources and all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. Thanks again for being with us. And we'll look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.